everybody, what the flick? We are back and we are not screwing around anymore. This is What the Fright. Every day, Monday through Thursday, for the rest of October, we are looking at some of the best horror movies of the 21st century so far. Yeah, I know we're not going to be able to get to them all, but we're going to focus on some really, really good ones. And joining me for the next two episodes is the fabulous Witney Seibold.
Why, hello.
My co-host on the Cancel Too Soon podcast, from whence we hail.
That's right.
And we're going to be talking about one of the most acclaimed horror movies in many, many years, and I think justifiably so. Whitney, tell us a little bit about The Witch.
The Witch is a Robert Eggers film that was released last year, February of last year, excuse me. It takes place in early 17th century New England, where a Puritan family is found to be far too puritanical for their own community. They're ousted from their community, and they have to essentially set up shop at the edge of the woods in a remote location somewhere in New England, where strange things are afoot. When the baby disappears, suspicions begin to fly, and the family begins to suspect that an evil presence might be stalking out of the woods.
Let's take a look.
What went we out into this wilderness to find? Leaving our country, kindred, our fathers' houses. For what? For the kingdom of God.
Boo! There you are. Boo!
Oh God, my Lord, I now begin. Oh, help me and don't leave my sin.
The Witch is, some people have difficulty with The Witch because The Witch is a horror movie, but it is not conventionally horrifying. It's not trying to shock you. It's pretty devoid of anything resembling a jump scare.
And there's not a lot sort of in the way of dialogue, it's more atmosphere than it is sort of plot driven. And the dialogue that is in there is really sort of alien. I really admire that the film is able to sort of capture the strange patois of early 17th century New England English.
And it's all part of Robert Eggers. He really researched the hell out of this movie. Everything from the production design to the costume design to the dialogue and the way people talked was all painstakingly researched to try to evoke this very particular sense of place. When we look at movies that take place in the past, and in particular, like sort of colonial America, we have this idea of how it looks, but it's all filtered through our understanding of the present day, and he's trying to evoke something completely weird.
It comes from sort of what we got in elementary school, just from like children's encyclopedias, and here's Sam Adams sawing wood. This is much more mud and earth and realism, and a lot of hysteria. And for these people, the demonic presence is very, very real. And we, the audience, aren't quite sure throughout the bulk of the film how much of this is based in their religious hysteria and how much of this is actually demonic. And even when some solutions start to be given near the end, you're still not quite sure how much of this is real.
I think that there is a really good interpretation either way, and I think they leave it open. You can
rather wisely.
You can take this movie completely literally, or you can say to yourself, well, all of their food was rotting. Maybe there was some sort of extenuating circumstance. I interviewed Robert Eggers about this, and we talked about sort of that sort of plausible deniability about it. And the point he brought up, which I think is something that we don't necessarily consider, and it's something that the movie itself can't really discuss because it can't contextualize itself. It's so immersed in its own moment. You can't look backward in that movie, is that religion, and indeed the idea of Satan and witchcraft, was very literal. At the time, it was there is an actual devil. There is
physical devil being.
I think even some religious people would argue the literalness of some elements of that now, but like at the time, it's just no. Witches are real. We just accept that as a reality.
And
it is fact. There's no one saying it's not.
And indeed, we see a witch in the movie. There's a witch living in the woods,
But
it's kind of in shadows. She's not like this fully formed character.
But it's so fleeting and it's so surreal that it is another thing where you can't tell, are we seeing a visualization of their paranoia or are we seeing the real thing? Because when the baby, it's the inciting incident, when the baby goes missing at the beginning, it's very sudden. You don't see exactly what happens. It's just sudden and horrifying and just gone.
And we know that the teenage girl played by Anya Taylor-Joy is the actress's name. She is blamed for all of this, and from a modern eye, we can start to see that this is a film very much about her persecution and, by extension, the persecution of all young women in general at the time and how that sort of led to the witchcraft trials. And there is definitely a sort of feminist revenge story lurking underneath this. But even if you don't accept that interpretation, which is just one I can kind of bring it to it myself, you can still appreciate the very terse, very stark, very realistic aesthetic that he's going for to create this atmosphere of existential dread before existentialism was really a thing in America.
Yeah, I don't think enough positive things can be said about the cinematography and production design in this film. It is, the woods are so craggy. They're just full of mysteries, even though you don't necessarily see anything in them. The rooms are so low, the lighting is so low, and the walls are so close, and there's nothing, they don't have anything to fill their lives. There's a whole plot point about how one of them has a cup. That's it. That's what we've got instead of paintings and anything else that we would put in our houses today. So there's this sense of isolation and mystery. Just the woods are this thick wall around their cabin, and there could be anything.
They're ugly and they're forbidding. This is not a warm pastoral sense of frontier America. This is like, we're going to move out onto the frontier and it's a pit of filthy mud. And there's nothing to do, and we're going to go insane, and our goat is going to have its own personality.
Right. And there is, of course, in addition to...
Black Phillip, by the way, gives perhaps the star performance of the film.
And that goat does everything.
So much heavy lifting.
He actually like almost gored Ralph Ineson over the course of the
Really?
film. Yeah, like not with like the point of him, but like the razor edges, like like in the first couple of weeks of shooting, and it sucked. Yeah, but the other thing I think this movie really focuses on a lot is there's this intense... They talk about the idea of being born with sin. That is the Puritan belief in that.
Original sin. It's
and
basis of a lot of Christian beliefs.
Absolutely. And, their children, when the baby goes missing, there's a lot of anxiety over, does this mean the child is going to hell? And they're wrestling with ideas that we still wrestle with today. And they also wrestle with their own hypocrisies and little lies, little deceits, little failures of pride just spiral and come back around.
How those things are conflated and expanded in these people's minds until there is a guilty party, even if there isn't.
Yeah, and just the way... I love movies about madness in which people are going mad, but you can't tell what moment it happened.
Yeah.
There's no moment where they snap. It's just at some point at the beginning of the movie, they're more or less a family, they're more or less making it a work, and by the end, it is all taken hold, and it is just a nightmare. And it is very terrifying, regardless of your interpretation, if you think something supernatural is going on or not. And this is...
It's Robert Eggers' only film to date.
So far.
Feature film. He's done a lot of shorts, but I'm really looking forward to what he does next.
He's supposedly working on a remake of Nosferatu.
That's perfect for him.
I would love to see that.
Talking about muddy filth in a faraway place, just throw a vampire in there.
And it's another one, and that's one where you can say oh, it's a classic horror movie. How dare they? Werner Herzog already remade it. That was brilliant too.
And it was itself an interpretation of Dracula, so we're all okay.
And Shadow of the Vampire was great as well. So plenty. Witney, what score do you give The Witch? All things considered,
it's pretty unassailable. I'd go as high as 9.5.
Wow. It's pretty good.
I don't want to give it 10 just because I want to stew with it for a few more years.
Yeah.
It is still a new film.
I think 10 has got to be reserved for perfection.
Yeah. So, but I'm going to say 9.5 for the time being because it's been over a year and it's still highly estimated.
I'm going to go a little lower. I'm going to give it a 9. And the reason I'm giving it a 9, it is exquisitely crafted. It is also a movie that you really have to be in the mood for. When I first saw The Witch, I thought it was a little dry. And as I've sat with it and as I've watched it over and over again, it grows on me more and more. But it is a very particular film. It's not a very inviting film. And I don't necessarily think it works at all times in all contexts. But it is fantastic and should be seen.
The language can be a bit of a barrier, but if you appreciate that sort of florid language, then it'll pull you in right away.
That's not so much the language, so much as it is the stark aesthetic. But
that
regardless,
too.
That's a minor critique of one of the best horror films of the century so far. So we will be back tomorrow talking about something schlockier.
Yeah.
Join us.